And now we're back to reality. Well, Chris, you work in Fahrenheit, don't you? Yeah, like we used to till we joined the European Union.
Yeah, well, we are forecast to be 31 today.
Yeah, all right.
So
today. So at the moment it's 12 degrees. So that's how much it's dropped.
That's lovely weather. Lovely weather.
Miguel likes the cold weather. So have you got the schedule, Miguel?
Mm-hmm, I've got everything on.
Okay, well, if you share your screen, then we can see it while we're talking.
Okay. I'm just waiting on Miss. She emailed me this morning.
All right. Okay.
Mark fee. 2, 3, 4.
So we got.
We'll give her a minute or two.
Yeah, definitely. We got Shalene, Cassandra.
There we go.
Leslie. Inside. Oh, someone else is coming in.
Mm-hmm. I'm LaShawn.
Right.
All right. Mm-hmm. So I think we have everyone. So good morning once again, ladies. Welcome to our, I believe this is our 10th anniversary. Is it Checkley? 2010.
For the risk manager, yes,
that's right. For the risk manager. Mm-hmm. It's an internationally accredited course through the University of Bangor and the Charter Banker in Scotland. This program also gives you credit towards the Charter Banker MBA if you decide to pursue that route. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I just sent you guys the syllabi of what we will be covering. Module, can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Yes, very clear.
Module 1, we'll be doing the enterprise-wide risk management.
Mm-hmm.
In Module 2, we'll speak about credit and operational risk. Module 3, investment and liquidity risk. Module 4, market risk and financial instruments. Module 5, regulations and compliance risk. And Module 6, reputational risk and corporate governance.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Checkley will handle the first 2 modules. So we have 6 Saturdays, or back-to-back, 10 to 12. And then we have Tuesdays for the remainder of the class with Mr. Jermaine Williams, Samuel Wilkinson, and Mr. Glenn Norgich. Now, our final exam is scheduled for August 29th, but that is tentative, depending on the situation that we are currently in with the social distancing.
Yeah, so the final exam is set by the Chartered Banker Institute in the UK. You know, so they're a separate examining body, which is really good because, you know, it means that the facilitators can't influence the exam questions. So all the exam questions have got to be based on the materials that you will have, you know, in your folder or electronically on your computers. And we've only had one question in 10 years, which is a very good record for the Chartered Banker Institute, that actually wasn't answerable from, you know, from the study materials. So they don't meet us. What they do is they get the materials from Miguel, and then they, you know, write the questions. And Miguel will tell you there's a chance to do a mock exam, which we really encourage.
Yes, you have a chance to do a mock exam. The mock exam is a link that we will send you, and you can do it right at home. Mm-hmm. You get your results right away, and they grade you by each section, so you can see how if you did well on section 1 or if you didn't do well on section 2, so forth.
Yeah, we think it's a really good idea to do it because if you've never taken an exam on a computer before, you know, it's quite different to taking an exam, you know, and writing all the answers down. So it's really good to have a practice on the machine. And the other thing that's really good is, obviously, you know, we all speak English, but the Chartered Banker Institute, you know, some of the phraseology might be slightly different to what we used to in Nassau. So again, it's a good idea for that. And as Miguel said, it's really good because you get the result within a minute or 2 minutes. So it's not like at the College of Bahamas or whatever, you know, where you might have to wait 2 or 3 weeks. And same in the UK, you know, with the universities, you have to wait a long time to get the results. So the results instantaneous. So you just have time for a really quick prayer before the computer will bing at you and give you a result. And very important for your revision because it will stream the results into the different modules. So it helps you focus your revision on the sections. So Miguel, do you want to say a little bit about our experiences on the final exam being open book?
Yeah, it's an open book exam. It's 70 questions in 2 hours. Our passing rate for this program is very high. I think it's like 8 out of 10 on the first go round, and the second go round, most everybody passes. Those who don't do well usually spend too much time digging in their books, and that 2 hours elapse, and they don't get to complete the exam. So in other words, any question that you leave undone is basically wrong. It's all multiple choice. So any question that you don't answer is automatically wrong. So the key is to answer all 70 questions. Answer all 70 questions as best as you can, and then go back into the book to reassure your answers.
Yeah, on the ones you're not too sure of. So, you know, go through. I know it's a long way off, but people usually ask us about the exam during this welcoming session. So this is why we're going on about it. So the recommendation is, you know, go through, answer all the ones you can, you know, from your knowledge that you built up, and then go back on the ones that you're not too sure of, referring, because as Miguel says, the people who don't pass generally, it's not because of the lack of understanding, it's because simply they try to look up, you know, all the answers in the paperwork, and it's just too slow process. Yeah,
and then they end up not completing 10. If you don't complete 10, that's a guarantee you will fail. Mm-hmm. So the key is to answer all 70 questions within 2 hours. And ladies, 2 hours goes by like that, very quickly. Okay,
yeah, very quick.
So I guess that's about it. I will be emailing you all the course materials once my lecturers go over each section and make sure there's no updates. Then I will go ahead for that. I know you all have modules 1 so far and the case studies. As soon as I have Mr. Checkley look over module 2, I will send that to you. As soon as Jermaine and Wilkinson take a look at their modules, I will go ahead and forward those to you. And as I said, the classes will be on Zoom until the government of the Bahamas tells us it's okay to
so just the day before yesterday in the UK, the government announced a further 3 weeks of self-isolation. So it's very bad here. We've got over 12,000 deaths now, not cases, but deaths in the UK. So it's really bad. It's mainly in London, of course, because of the density of the population, but also in Birmingham, where there's a very large Muslim community, and by nature of their culture and religion, they all get together, you know, which they've been told not to do, but they're all getting together to make prayers, etc., which actually under circumstances is the worst thing you could do. You know, you need to stay on your own. I know it's a hard thing to do. So Miguel, what we normally do now is just ask persons to make a brief introduction of themselves, you know, like what's your job currently, you know, where are you working, and what are you hoping to get out of the program, because that'll help us with the, you know, the pace of the introduction.
Anyway, first, Mr. Checkley, I'm going to go ahead and turn you over as the host. I want to make you the host.
Right.
Okay, so you go ahead and share screen do whatever you want to do. So you're now the host.
But we just need to ask the people who would like to start.
I'll start.
Thank you. Anyway.
Hi, how are you?
Fine.
Candy Mac. My name is Candice Maxey. I'm an attorney by profession. I work currently at a small asset management company.
Right.
I'm the director and office manager there, but like I said, I'm an attorney by profession. And I'm just really looking to, I guess, expand my knowledge in risk. I've done the ICA course, and is risk and compliance go together. So I'm just hoping to expand my horizons and continue to learn in the field.
Excellent. Well, you'll find, you know, as the course materials build up, they're very, very extensive. Yes. So welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Hi. Good morning.
Cassandra. Good morning.
I'm Cassandra Johnson.
Yes.
I'm compliance officer at CIFX Pro, also doing outsourcing of compliance for Privatam. Right. Also doing remediation for an offshore bank in the interim. What I hope to get out of this course is a better understanding of the risk-based approach. Yes. As we have, the Securities Commission have taken on a risk-based approach. So this is what I'm hoping to get a better understanding of it to help me perform my duties better. Excellent. Yes, we'll look at the risk-based approach and where it fits in within the supervisory review context, and also where compliance, you know, fits within the risk management aspect. And we'll also, not this Saturday, but probably on Saturday the 2nd of May. So that will be our third session together. What we'll do then is we'll look at a very large organization where they reveal what their strategies are, you know, for managing risk. And that's a really good thing for us to look at. So we'll be paving our way towards that. And then we'll have this very practical example as we conclude module 1, which I think you'll find very helpful in your job. Yes, thank you.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
I'm currently employed at the Central Bank of the Bahamas, the senior analyst supervisory role. And I have direct oversight for the domestic banks, credit unions, and money transmission businesses. So this course to sharpen my risk management skills. And I'm also currently studying for the CAMS exam, Certified Anti-Money Laundering Specialist.
Oh, yes, yes.
So like someone mentioned before, you know, compliance and risk, they basically work in tandem. So
that's right, yes.
Sharpen my skills.
Excellent. So what we'll be looking at, as I just mentioned, and we'll also be drawing on the recommended international best practices, you know, which are put out by the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision. And these are global recommendations. And then each of the central banks in different jurisdictions will take, you know, the parts that they think will fit within your geographical context. So yes, welcome to the program. So when you're not talking, if you could mute your mic, and then we won't get too much background noise. Thank you.
Wait 1 second, Mr. Checker. Can you please? I believe there's one other person wants to be admitted.
All right, you do that then.
Yeah,
no. So you'll have to take the host away from me, because I can't admit them. Yeah.
You can't see them to admit them.
No, because it comes up that they're in the waiting room. Can you see them in the waiting room? So you'll have to just take the host back and admit them.
No, yeah, give me a second. Lady, just give me a second.
Yeah.
While he's doing that, Mr. You know if Basel wrote any papers relative to credit unions and MTBs specifically? Because I know they have a great focus as it relates to banking.
Yes.
But those areas, we have significant risks with those. So do you know if any papers are specific to credit unions and money transmission businesses?
The answer to that is Yes, there are. And when we go through some of the documentation, you'll see it really doesn't matter whether, you know, whether it's an internet-based financial institution or whether it's a credit union or whether it's a finance house or whatever. The idea of the global regulations, and you'll also see, we'll go through this where the encouragement now is the Basel Committee to work and coordinate with IOSCO, which is the Securities Commission's regulator, and we work, and Miguel will tell you about CISR. That's the Chartered Institute of Securities Investment. They're headquartered in London, and they've got over 30,000 members globally. So they're working alongside the same people, and then also the insurance companies. Recently, the Association of Insurance Regulators, they're coming in as well. And I'll show you that, you know, during the presentation. So very good question.
Mr. Chetty, I think you have to go ahead and make me the host. I'm trying to make myself the host, but I can't. I have a clink.
Okay, sorry, folks. There's a strong security thing on this now. So I can't, where do I make you the host, does it say?
But if you click on the participants to the bottom, and you should see it, and then go to zoom over to me and more, and then make host or something like that.
Let's have a look. I can't even see you now.
Biff's the ZM1.
Sorry, folks. We're just having a slight technical problem here. Right, there's Miguel. Right, let's have a look.
And then go to more.
Make host, yeah.
Yes, make me host, and then I'll
change host. Yeah, change host. Sorry, ladies.
All right.
It's just like technical issue. This is only the second time I've used this. Yeah.
Okay, you can continue. I have it.
Okay, has she come in now?
Yeah, I have it. I'm good.
Okay, so who wants to go next, please?
Hi, my name is Shalene Davis.
Yes.
I am a relationship officer at Itaú Bank and Trust.
Yes.
And I want to do this course because I also did the ICA course. Yes. And I've worked as an internal control officer as well as a junior compliance officer previously. So I think this will complement my knowledge in compliance and in internal controls.
It should do. It should, and it should also, if I might use the word, enhance your knowledge, because you get a wider perspective of risk management overall, and actually seeing, you know, where the compliance function fits in. And we look at this because some organizations call it 3 lines of defense, and we'll look at that procedure as well. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Leslie.
Hi, Leslie.
I've been in the compliance and AML field for the past 6 years.
Right.
And I'm taking the course to enhance my knowledge while during this time that I'm off. Currently, my department had to close due to the COVID-19. So I'm taking this opportunity to enhance my skills.
Yes, well, we should have welcomed you on that basis, actually, but we didn't. And it's very, you know, good of you to participate in the program during this very, very difficult time. And we've found quite a number of persons are doing that because it's a good time to try and take your mind off these terrible problems of self-isolation and curfews and things. And even shopping, you know, has become a terrible drama, particularly in the UK when we've had this terrible panic buying, which wasn't necessary, you know. So if you couldn't get to the supermarket till late in the day, when you got in there, most of the shelves, you know, the shelves were empty. And you probably heard the name Sainsbury, which is a very large supermarket group in the UK. And there's a Sainsbury's near where I live, and it was really difficult to get anything, but things are slowly improving, I'm pleased to say. So welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Anyone else, or has everybody spoken now? I lost track a bit by...
Hi, my name is LaShawn, and I work for Ann Barker, Bahamas. I am a risk analyst.
Yes.
And I'm taking the course just to get a wider range of knowledge
Good.
And so that I can develop my skills some more.
Yes. So do you have a risk register within Ansbacher, or a risk log, or a database?
Yes,
currently?
we do.
Good. Oh, that's good. Okay, because that's one of the things we'll be looking at, you know, the importance of this risk register and the kind of things we can draw out of it and the lessons we can learn. And some of the case studies, what we'll do is we'll really, you know, get them apart from a risk management perspective, and then we'll slot it into our own style of risk register that we'll build up. Not just in this module, but in module 2, when I do credit and operational risk with you, the operational risk side, we will use some case studies and the risk register approach. And you'll find actually, when all of this started, everyone thought the credit risk would be the most difficult to manage, but we've had years and years of experience of managing credit risk. So I know it's still a difficult subject, but what's proven to be the most difficult, even for the huge international banks, you know, such as HSBC and you know, Barclays and people like that, the operational risk side has proven the most difficult to manage in terms of risk. Why? Because the events are so varied, aren't they? You know, you can have lots of small operational risk situations, and then you can have some very bad ones as well. Okay, now I saw Miguel kind of moving away from his desk just at the wrong time, but I'm hoping I can share my screen with you, and then we can make a start. Let's see. Now then. There it is. Okay, now first question to you is, oops, it's gone. Can you see my PowerPoint on the screen there, on your screens?
Yes. Can you make it a bit bigger?
Yes.
Yeah, I am right now.
Yes, I can see it. I do have a question. Will you share these PowerPoint presentations with us?
Yes, Miguel will send all the materials out to you, which includes the PowerPoints as well, yes. Well, you should have these already for module 1. Have you?
I'm gonna check. I saw emails from him, but I haven't opened up everything as yet, but I will check and confirm.
Okay, well,
yes,
you should.
An email from him.
Yes, there's an email.
Yeah, you should definitely have them because what I always do is I ask Miguel to email me a copy of what he's emailed out to you, so I can be absolutely sure, you know, that we've got the same things, because obviously, you know, each year we make some changes to the materials as appropriate. So you should definitely have these. You should definitely have these. Okay, so the objectives of this first session really are to get an understanding and a knowledge and critical understanding of the principles and practices of modern international enterprise risk management. So the words there, enterprise risk management, or you can use enterprise-wide risk management, or you'll see a bit later on that the Basel Committee for Banking Supervision, they're now calling it firm-wide risk management, which is a very nice expression to use. So we'll explore, recognize, appreciate the complexity inherent in managerial decisions relative to risk within the business portfolios. So, you know, all of you making the introductions there, you'll have a different risk profiles, you know, on the activities that you're doing. And you'll see as we move forward right through the 6 modules that the intention is it's as practical a course as possible. So yes, you know, there'll be some academic content. Yes, there'll be information on a macro basis. But the idea all the time is, you know, after each module, you try and reflect on what you've been looking at and then see where you can bring this, you know, into your everyday job, or bring it in as possible suggestions to discuss with your colleagues. So it's meant, all our programs are meant to be really practical programs. Now, if we look at the first definition I could find on enterprise risk management, and this was, as Miguel said, you know, we started this 10 years ago. The source, and you could look at this website later, is KOZO, C-O-S-O. And if you do a search on that, you'll find it's an American organization who are consultants on risk management. And in a moment, I'm going to show you one of the diagrams, which was one of the main parts of their activity in terms of enterprise risk management. So this is their definition. It's a process affected by an entity's board of directors, management, and other personnel. Now that's a very important starting point for us to think about. So it says the board of directors, and we'll find this all the time through our program and all the time through those of you who've been doing anti-money laundering programs. We always have this, you know, KYC, know your customer. Now, know your customer wasn't started in terms of anti-money laundering. It was started almost 100 years ago now by the London Institute of Bankers, that when you were lending money out, you know, whether it was to a person, a small business, a medium or large, the idea for the banker to begin with was to get to know the customer, yeah? And then the various mnemonics developed, and we'll look at some of those in module 2. I'll show you some of the frameworks that as risk managers, when we're in discussion with the credit department or with the senior managers, you know, we'll know the sort of things that they should be doing. So it starts with the board of directors. You've all heard the expression, setting the tone from the top. And whatever position you have in terms of risk, your job will be very difficult unless, you know, the tone from the top is supportive towards you. So we'll be looking at that. So strategy setting and across the enterprise. Now, setting the strategy for risk management is really, really important. And that strategy on a common sense basis, and we've got all ladies attending today, and you know, we all know as men that ladies have much more common sense than we ever do or ever will have. So what you'll find as we progress through this, there might be some complex terminology and things like that that we got to get grips with, but you have to in whatever job you do. But what you'll find, a lot of the processes and a lot of the case studies revolve around very much a common sense approach. You know, what are the risks there and how can they be handled? So the strategy is really very important. And these are designed to identify potential events that may affect the entity, whatever type of entity it is. So it could be a corporate or a bank or whatever, and to manage risks within its risk appetite. So that's another thing I'd like you to highlight or just make a note of. Risk appetite would be extremely important because, again, when we're developing our risk plans, it's not just compliance, you know, we're checking things are done correctly. What we're doing with risk is it's much more the strategies for risk management, and those risks will reflect very much the risk appetite of the organization. Now, the risk appetite, as the central bank in Bahamas will know, will vary with the institutions that they visit or they monitor or they regulate. Some institutions have a very conservative and steady approach, you know, to what they're doing, and they don't really have a strong risk appetite. They just have a conservative approach to business, which they're quite satisfied with, and that's very fine. The contrast to that is some businesses you'll find have extremely sharp focus on growth. Now, there's nothing wrong with growing. You know, we all want businesses to grow, but another risk to business is where the business grows beyond its sustainable growth rate. Now, that's a bit of a mouthful. A more old-fashioned term would be overtrading. Now, you might have heard of overtrading. Overtrading is where a business grows faster than it can actually manage to grow. And that's usually because of the cash flow. So you can have sales going like this, profits going like this, but when they're growing too quick, the cash flows will be going like that. So the cash flows will be under stress, and often we'll see a liquidity crisis. And we look at some case studies where that occurs, where the growth's going well, the profits are going well, but behind the scenes, there's a liquidity problem. And again, this is something else that the Basel Committee have picked up, during the 2008 global crisis. So they've brought in some extra liquidity measures, which I'll be interested to see when we come to those, whether they're currently being looked at by your central bank in Bahamas, or whether they have plans to bring these in. To provide reasonable assurance regarding the achievement of the objectives. Now, no one can guarantee like 100% that we've got all the risks covered, because last year we introduced a section in the program on business continuity planning. Goodness me, what a foresight, yeah? I mean, that was within the mind of all the problem hurricanes that we've had. It certainly wasn't in our mind about this coronavirus and the fact that it would, cause lots and lots of problems for business people right across the world. So this is the KOZO framework. So when you get a chance to look on the KOZO website, so I'll give you, and the other facilitators as well, we'll all give you, some website references and things to do extra reading where you think it would help your job, or where you think it would just help your knowledge. But just to repeat, the questions will be based on the materials, yeah? So the questions for the exam won't be based on any extra reading that we might recommend that you do. So you could get a question on this, give us an example of an enterprise risk management framework, and, they might put different headings in there, and you need to select these. So the approach, if you're not too sure where to start, and this was already mentioned in your introductions to me, the strategic aspect. So you can see we're starting with the strategic aspect here, because a lot of businesses, due to their strategy, put themselves into a risky position, which they didn't really need to do. With hindsight, they maybe shouldn't have done what they tried to do. And a good example of this, of course, is where a business tries to go into a merger, or even more difficult, an acquisition. Because when one business acquires another, there's all sorts of issues will come out. At the beginning, everybody's quite excited because it's something new, it's a new project. That's what people like, the day-to-day job has a new focus. We're going to acquire so-and-so. But behind that, there can be all sorts of problems, like the cultural issues, the geographical issues, the operational issues, IT issues will be paramount. If it's two large organizations, does one of them have a platform, an IT platform, that can be scaled by, the two of them coming together? So strategy will be very important. And the second step, using this KOZO approach, is to look at the operational risks, and then based on those two, looking at reporting in terms of trying to bring this together. And we look at an example of this, an integrated risk reporting system. So this is not, where you're just looking at the risks in isolation. This is trying to put it together in terms of an integrated report. And then there you see compliance there as well. I wouldn't say at the bottom of the list, it's just the positioning of the categories on this particular approach. Now, for people working in organizations, if you're at the enterprise level, so you can think of that as head office, and you could think, for example, of maybe the Commonwealth Bank in Bahamas, or Bank of Bahamas, you could be, enterprise level would be, where you're in head office. So the framework within head office will be much more extensive, and also will need a degree of coordination so we can get these risks coordinated and sent in from the various branches into head office there. You could be working in a division and reporting on a divisional basis. You could be working in a business unit processes. That, again, using the banking analogy there, that could be a branch, branch of the bank reporting into head office. And probably the most difficult is the subsidiary, because the subsidiary although it will need to report into the parent company, the subsidiary needs to have its own good risk management processes because it's a subsidiary, you know, and not part of the enterprise level entity there. And then these 8 components of the framework are interrelated. So you can see, hopefully on the screen there, we'll be looking at the internal environment of the operations of the business. Can we identify these risk events that we might be anticipating? So we need, as we build up the register, to have certain events that we can, you know, kind of predict that we're probably going to have these risk events based on our past experiences. And then there'll be a risk assessment process where we're looking at how severe this response, this event is. Is it a high impact event or low or medium? And then the next important section in building up the register will be, what response do we make to this risk? Is there any way we can mitigate or overcome the risks as we move forward? Then we'll have control activities over the risk reporting, information, and communication. And this should fit in there, this business continuity planning concept. And then monitoring and control will be part of the risk job. Any questions so far? Oh, yeah. Okay.
No, that seems straightforward.
Okay, good, excellent, thank you. So thanks, Cassandra. So what we try to do, you know, because we're all sitting and we're not used to sitting for hours and hours, so we'll work from 10 to 11, and then on the hour we'll take a 10-minute break just to, you know, get a cup of tea or stretch your legs or whatever, and then we go on from 11:10, you know, through to 12. Now this diagram is really, really important, and I'm hoping it might provoke some discussion. It usually does. Now the reason it usually does is the sequencing on this diagram. Now, let me see. Yeah, it should. Yeah, it should come up in sequence, but it's not. Now, if it had come up in the proper sequence, what you'd see to begin with would be just the green box in the middle. Yeah, so you'll have to imagine this part. So this is a risk in my presentation straight away. I don't know why that's happened, because it normally comes up in sections. So the center point then is the board risk policies and the important aspects of governance. And you will have a module, you know, which incorporates a lot about corporate governance, which is really, really important. Now what I can do is, because this diagram's come up as it is, I could ask if anyone would like to start us off. Where do you think we should start on this diagram? Do we start with the top left quadrant of the wheel, or do we start with the strategy? What would you think?
I would think that you would start with identifying the risk first before you can actually strategize.
Excellent. Now that's a brilliant answer, because quite often persons within the organization, they dash straight into the strategy side. Why? Because strategy, you know, it's quite a sort of sexy thing to do. Or let's, you know, sit down together and we write our strategic plan, our objectives, how we're going to implement and all this. But all of that could be a waste of time, because the strategy needs to reflect, as Cassandra said, and we have discussion on this every time on our programs, because a lot of people will go for the strategy box, but actually Cassandra's really right. In our opinion, you know, you should start with this identifying the risks. What's the point in having this sort of brilliant strategy that when you then start to look at the risks, oh, well, where do these risks fit in with, you know, with this huge strategy that we've come up with? So the starting point is, because each and every organization is different, we should start by identifying the risks. What risks do we think we'll face within our organization? And we make a list of those. Next step is, it's hard to identify risks. The next step is even harder. How can we measure this risk? So can we come up with some way of quantifying what the impact of this risk might be? And some people use what they call a heat grid in their register, you know, where they might have sort of bright red, amber, and the shade of green where they're not so significant. And then the next part is there any way, now that we've identified them and quantified them, what we're now looking at is the more severe risks, is there any way we could shift these risks or trade these risks away or mitigate them maybe through some type of insurance? Now, insurance can be difficult because when you insure things, the insurance isn't always, you know, up to what you might expect. So here's a question to you. When you had the terrible hurricane damage in Abaco, were the people in Abaco, their houses, were they insured or not?
The majority of them were not insured.
Yeah, yeah. Was that by choice, or did they have insurance coverage, but it wasn't effective?
It's hard to say. I think a lot of persons just didn't take out insurance because of the cost.
Right. And presumably the cost is really high because of the threat of hurricanes, yeah? So
right, we're in a hurricane zone, yes.
Yeah. So what happened over the last 5 months here in the UK? We've had 3, not hurricanes, but very, very bad storms, which have been on the back of the hurricanes that you had. You know, they came across the Caribbean, then they hit the edge of Florida, eastern seaboard of the US, eastern seaboard of Canada, then they turn right and head for the UK. So by the time they get to us, of course, they're not as severe as you experience, but I mean, they've been really, really, you know, I mean, 80-mile-an-hour winds and things like that, and a lot of storm damage on people's property, which we thought would be insured. So I had some storm damage at home myself. You get in touch with the insurance company, and of course, what do they say? Oh, it's an act of God. So you're not insured under the policy. So that's a terrible thing, isn't it? So why are we paying, you know, hundreds of dollars each year for the insurance when you actually need it, it's not covered. So there we are. But insurance would be a good thing to consider. So next step will be the strategy. So we've identified the risks, et cetera. Now we can sit down and come up with a strategic plan in terms of risk management. So this is not the organization's strategic plan, you know, which might be to go to other family islands, blah, 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 or to open business in Florida or whatever, or for the central bank, you know, would be their working methodologies in terms of the people who they control via licenses. So it's not a business strategic plan. This is the risk. This is the risk strategic plan, which, as I promised you, we'll have a very good example on, or 2 if we have time. We usually look at the Barclays group because they're very transparent in revealing what they do within the plan. And then sometimes we also look at HSBC, but theirs is a bit more complex, you know, because HSBC, they're like everywhere in the world, aren't they? When you land at an airport and you see a map of the world, there's red dots everywhere. So the next step would be within the plan to set some key objectives. That's the sort of time scales. And then the hard part, of course, is implementation. We're all pretty good, you know, at writing strategies and key objectives, but the hardest part in any business, whatever type of business you've got, is implementation. Because it's hard work, isn't it? You know, it's the same in the UK at the moment. You know, our government's saying, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and we're going to do the other, you know, because of the coronavirus. But to actually get any action, you know, is much more difficult, even to the extent of people in the health service having to take what you would call garbage bags, you know, those black bin liners or grey, and cutting them up and making temporary masks for themselves. And these are care workers. It's ridiculous. Why? Because we don't have enough. You know, we haven't got enough supplies for all of the emergency situations. And in London, they've converted the XL exhibition centre into a hospital with 4,000 wait for the figure, 4,000 beds in this new emergency hospital in London at the Excel Centre. So you can imagine, you know, the demands on protective equipment and on ventilators, etc., etc. So implementation is really hard. Then the management box, I guess, is where most of you will be coming in. So can we manage the processes we need to improve our risk management? And what about leadership within these teams? You know, will we have a chief risk officer? And if we do, what sort of level do they command? Now, if they're too far down, it'll be really difficult for risk. So really what we've recommended for a long time is the chief risk officer should be at board of director level appointment, and then they'll be very effective. Yeah, it's got to be senior management. Otherwise, it's really difficult. I met an organization a few years ago, and I was just in discussion. I said, oh, what have you done about Basel II? And they said, oh, we've solved that. I said, oh, right, that's quick, because there's a huge amount of challenges. Can you tell me what? They said, yes, we gave it to the compliance officer. Goodness me, can you imagine that? We gave Basel to the compliance officer. Wow, I wouldn't like to be that compliance officer. So no matter how good you are, you know, it's going to be a tough track on risk. So there's management of processes. We might need some innovative thinking around the systems that we have. Can we try where we can to develop relatively simple solutions to possibly complex problems and resist the temptation of buying things in, yeah? Because when you buy things in, they might not always be what your expectation is. So you have to be very careful, particularly when we look at credit risk in Module 2. There's been a lot of organizations and within the Caribbean where they've bought in supposed you know, clever modeling solutions, but they don't work because within the Caribbean, you know, we don't have many large companies that are listed on the stock market. And most of these very complicated credit models are developed on the basis of stock market information of large companies. So, you know, if in your financial institution, say commercial bank, we could pick the Commonwealth or Bank of Bahamas, you know, how many large companies will they have that they're making credits to that are listed on the stock market? And the answer is going to be very few, yes? So it's the same with all of these risks. What we need to try and do is take a common sense approach. What can we try and build it ourselves? Get together with people, you know, people have good skills, and then maybe we can get some extra training coming in. And then the important area of the database. So we'll come on to that, the collection of these events. And then the really difficult part for every one of you working in risk is this will be the major objection to whatever you want to do.
Yes.
Because risk are seen as a non-profit making. You don't make any sales, you don't sell any products, you don't make any profits, you're just a cost drain on the business. And you'll be fighting a constant battle on this, but you've got to try and overcome this by suggesting, you know, we're not in this short term, right? There's a lot of short-termism in business, particularly in America and particularly recently in London, where they're just trying to, you know, get what they can short-term out of the business. Business should have a longer-term view, which is why risk management's very important as we go forward. And yes, there'll be an effect on the cash flow in the beginning because there will be certain things we've got to spend money on. But longer term, the cash flow will improve. Why? Because we won't have, you know, these events that with good risk management we can foresee and react to. So we should reduce the number of shocks that we get within business, and therefore the capital base of the business over time will improve. And when we look at some examples, you'll see on the examples that where good risk management is in place, the value and the value measurements of the businesses improve. Where there's poor risk management, the opposite happens. The value can go down and can go down very, very sharply. Okay. So I talked a little bit about Basel. Let me just give you a summary of the latest. So this is classified as an executive overview, because if I just go forward, yeah, there we are. Can you see at the bottom of this diagram summarizing Basel II? There's the website reference of www.bis.org. Now, for those of you who don't know, I'm sure the lady from the Central Bank will know, but that stands for the Bank of International Settlements. And if you go onto their website, this is where the central banks of all countries report into. And on the bis.org website, you'll see right on the homepage is publications by the Basel Committee, the Basel Committee for Banking Supervision. And there's lots and lots of publications. And what we'll pick on, you know, is the ones most appropriate to our risk management program. Now, two of the key publications are Basel II. So just to backtrack, Basel I was in the 1980s, and Basel I covered primarily and almost exclusively credit risk. So Basel I was really, really focused on credit risk. Then when Basel II came out, as we'll see, it was much, much deeper approach to risk management, and it looked at credit risk, market risk, and operational risk. So three key areas of risk, and the documentation is absolutely huge. So when you go onto that website, if you click on the Basel publication, you'll see it's over 200 pages. So it's a massive document, but the good news is it's a PDF, it's free, and it's downloadable in sections. So if you're interested in a particular section, you know, maybe operational risk or credit risk or whatever, you can download that particular section. And then Basel III is the latest. And if you want to make a note, if anyone asks you, what is Basel III? The answer to begin with is Basel III is enhancements to Basel II. Now, if Basel III replaced Basel II, it would be much easier for us during this program, because we could just say, well, let's just look at Basel III, you know, and forget the Basel II, but unfortunately we can't, because Basel III is enhancements to Basel II. So as risk managers, we need to have a working knowledge of both. So the Basel III idea, and bearing in mind these are enhancements, so here's one of the enhancements, would be to strengthen the global capital framework. So they're going to build up on these three pillars of Basel II that we're going to see. And I put that in italics for you there. So in a moment, we'll look at these three pillars of Basel II, and then we'll see what enhancements they're making through three. So bullet point number 2, look, the reforms raise both the quality and quantity of the capital base of firms. So what we're going to see there is more capital coming in as a buffer, you know, against problems within the business, and more quality of the capital. Now, what they mean by that is no esoteric financial instruments. What they mean really is, if we're looking at a business in Nassau, you know, if it's a small business, it probably has like capital as its position there. If it's growing, it might have capital plus retained earnings, yes. If it's a large business, there might be quite a number of entries that make up the capital base. But what the Basel Committee are saying, what we're going to look for in financial institutions is the share capital plus retained earnings. So quite a short and sharp definition. So it's quite straightforward, whereas it's been quite complicated before. Now, number 3, I talked a little bit about, you know, growing faster than your sustainable growth. And of course, banks and financial institutions can do the same. So what they're doing is bringing in a leverage ratio that serves as a backstop to contain this over expansion of the balance sheet. Now, I have a short case study on that, which we'll look at a little bit later, and you'll see exactly, you know, how this works in practice. Now, these are complex topics, and they make great challenges to the way in which we manage financial institutions, and indeed to how the central banks have to respond. They're very challenging, and different countries and regions will face some unique difficulties. For example, you know, we think of China as a huge place, and the Chinese banks are absolutely massive, and they've just very recently moved into Basel II, so they're not under Basel III yet. In Africa, sections of Africa, they're still on Basel I. They haven't even managed to get to Basel II yet, so different jurisdictions will be on different topics. Very pleased to say in Nassau, you know, we did Basel seminars with central bank assistants when Wendy Craig was the governor. You know, we had seminars in the Hilton Hotel and other places where we talked about it all. So it was quick. It was very quick. I think the first one was 2005, and Basel II only came out in 2004. So Basel II and III will provide a framework for firm-wide risk management to include all the risks facing the business. Now you'll see I put 2 question marks there. You know, I could have put a few more, because to include all the risks facing the business, you know, it's almost impossible, isn't it?
Yes,
it
is.
Yeah, I mean, how can you foresee? I call it a galaxy. There's a galaxy of risks. You know, you can identify all of these risks, which we could have done if we'd all met, say, November last year, and nobody would have put a virus risk.
Exactly.
You know, like we've seen now. You know, even the people with the best risk management program, you know, would be really difficult. So here is Basel II. So think about Basel II. This is 2004, you can see there. So when this came out in 2004, it created a shockwave because, you know, before we'd had a few documents on credit, you know, nothing very, very extensive. And then when this came out, goodness me. So if you want to research it, you can, and you'll see it on the BIS website, and you'll see it's July 2004. And it was massive. I think it was 250 pages in total. And the main difference with this was they decided to create 3 pillars. Now they could have created, you know, 3 divisions or 3 sections, but the Basel Committee decided to call it these 3 pillars. And you can see, look, pillar 1 is to do with the minimum capital requirement for institutions. That's very, very important. So that's going to be a balance sheet measurement. Now, if you want to make a note, the international minimum capital requirement for many, many years by the Basel Committee was 8%. So that was the international figure. Now, the lady from the central bank, do you know what your capital requirement figure is at the moment, Natasha?
For the international banks, it's the 8%. For our domestic market, we have trigger and target ratios of 14% and 17%.
Excellent. Thank you for responding so quick. So the next question would be, why are they so much higher than 8%?
The domestic banks, because that's the core of our financial system. And
Yeah.
so we hold them to higher standards, and they keep a higher balance than the international, who pose less risk to the overall financial sector.
Excellent. Brilliant answer. Thank you so much. So the idea is that the central bank in the different jurisdictions, and Nassau is a great example there, most central banks will set a capital level higher than the 8%. Because when you think about it, the capital base where it's 8% minimum capital sounds very low, doesn't it, really? So it's much more sensible to have a more cautious approach like you're doing in Nassau with these extra levels of capital, because at the end of the day, the capital in every business, you know, whether it's John Bull Town Bay Street, which of course is probably a bad example at the moment because they're probably closed like everywhere else, but the capital within their business would be a certain figure, and the capital in the financial institutions will be different. So pillar 1 was the minimum capital requirement, and we'll come on to that in a bit more depth in a moment or two. And then pillar 2 is the one that's really, really important to us during our risk management program, because this is to do with the supervisory review process, which, as we'll see, includes, risk management, it includes compliance, it includes, internal audit, external audit, etc., etc. And then pillar 3 goes right to the directors. Pillar 3 is disclosure and market discipline. And this is where the Basel Committee encourage the directors of all financial institutions to reveal what they're doing. Now, this revealing is very, very important, particularly when we look at the Barclays example, because they have such a huge shareholder base. The shareholders want to know what's going on with the organization in which I have my money invested by way of shares. So generally, this revealing will be in the annual report and accounts. So that's the normal disclosure. Now I'm just going to show you this diagram very quickly on the screen, and then we're on the hour, so we're going to take a short 10-minute break when I will explain it in more detail. But this is my effort from quite a few years ago of trying to put together 257 pages of Basel II into one piece of paper. So I hope that you will find it helpful. And if people are asking you about it, well, please feel free to show them this slide, because this slide will give them, probably enough information for what they actually need to get an overview of what Basel II is. So you'll see the 3 pillars again. Look, pillar 1, capital strategy. Pillar 2, the supervisory review. And pillar 3, the disclosure. Okay, so let's take a 10-minute break and we'll reconvene at, just trying to work out the time difference, 10 minutes past 11 for you?
Fine.
Okay.
Okay, so just take a break. I'll just switch off my mic for the moment. Okay, are you ready to continue?
Yes, thank you.
Go back.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, there's Miguel. Miguel, did you press the record?
Yes, it's recording. Everything's recording.
Okay, great. Well done. Thank you. Okay, so this Basel chart, and as mentioned before, Miguel, that we were pretty quick off the mark when we had the Basel II seminar. I think it was in Hilton Hotel, and we had probably over 200 people there. So there was a lot of interest. So in summary, you can see there's the 3 pillars again within the Basel report. And pillar 1 is to do with the mathematical side. So if you really like mathematics, pillar 1's a good place to head for, and you can see the various divisions under credit risk there. So there's alternatives. Under Basel I, there were no alternatives. Basel I puts strict procedures in place relative to credit risk, but you can see there are 3 approaches under credit: standardized, internal ratings, foundation, and advanced. And we'll come on to those in more detail in module 2 when we talk about credit risk. Market risk, more difficult, but using the mathematical models of value at risk, and you'll have a module on market risk and financial instruments. And then in module 2, when I talk about operational risk, I'll take you through, you can see there's 3 approaches there as well. But this advanced measurement, where it was expected that the very large international banks would have, I wouldn't say no difficulty, but would be able to model operational risk using some type of advanced risk modeling, hasn't proven to be the case. And there's only probably less than 20 banks in the whole world that managed to get on to advanced measurement of operational risk, for the reasons we discussed earlier. Operational risk events are so varied, the impacts in some cases can be extreme, and we're going to look at a case study shortly where you'll see an extreme impact. So it's a difficult one. 2 is what we're more concerned about on this particular program, risk management program. And you can see pillar 2 there, giving us sections that include compliance. So people working in compliance, you'll be expected to make sure the organization is compliant with the capital strategies being set by the central bank. And the lady from the central bank, Latasha, she gave us, for example, the regulatory capital ratio in Nassau. So that would be the sort of thing compliance officers have got to make sure about. And then you can see, just moving along there, where I'm hovering my mouse, you can see other sections will be the risk culture, creating this risk culture. So that's a job, of the risk officer or risk manager or chief risk officer, if we get that level of appointment, including HR, communications, reporting, training, approved persons. And this very, very important procedures manual, because again, when the central bank inspectors come to see you, they're going to be asking for the credit risk manual, market risk manual if you are doing any trading type of risk, and then operational risk manual. So they'll be very, very important documents to produce. And as we said earlier, the tone has got to be set from the top. So if I were visiting you and you gave me, for example, your operational risk manual, I would expect the first few pages to be from the board of directors. So the board of directors must set the approach to the risk manual. Same with credit risk. For example, the board of directors should say, what their credit policies are, what their sector exposure could be. Do they have any policies on concentration of credits? Any policies on different types of businesses? So they would be all right at the front of the manuals. Then in terms of risk management that we're talking about, organizational structure, categorization, etc., etc. And then this important thing where we talked about the risk register and building up our risk event database. And the Basel suggestion on that is a minimum of 3 years. So if you haven't started, you need to get started quick. And what they actually recommend is a 5-year database to give us a good chance of being predictive in our approach to the risk management, to the risk events. Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, any questions on that diagram? Because it's quite a complicated diagram.
Yes, sorry, just to go over the risk event database. When you speak database, these are just possible events that could happen?
That's right, yes. So you're trying to build up, who's speaking, please?
Sorry, this is Candice.
Candice.
McAfee.
Okay, yes, thank you. So I'll give you an example as we progress, and particularly in Module 2, we'll look at the risk event database for operational risk. But in a few moments after we've done the case study, I'll show you 2 diagrammatic models that will assist us in building up the type of events that we're going to be looking at. So if I can just kind of defer your question just for a few minutes.
No problem.
Come on to that, yeah. Well, it's given me time to think, well, I've missed pillar 3, didn't I? These are the strategies, and this is the board of directors setting out what strategies they have for risk management. And that was your question earlier on, Cassandra, wasn't it, in terms of the strategies? So when we look at the Barclays case in our 3rd Saturday of Module 1, we'll see their example on disclosure, and it's very, very well written. It's very extensive, and we can get a lot of good ideas out of that. So this was Basel II in summary in terms of what I just mentioned. In credit risk, there's the three choices: basic, intermediate, advanced, which we'll look at in Module 2. In operational risk, 3 choices again. Now, towards Basel III was announced by way of press release in September 2010. So, you know, we're 10 years on from there, and, you know, a lot of organizations and indeed geographical regions haven't had a chance to get into Basel III yet. But you can see this was, once again, I mentioned a lot of these Basel reports, the really, really interesting parts are at the end. So for example, in Basel II, when you wade your way through 250 pages and you get towards the end, which they call annexes and we would call appendices, you'll find some very useful templates. And it's the same with this Basel III press release. The most interesting part is right towards the end. And that's this, look, you can see it's called Annex 2, so Appendix 2, phase-in arrangements. Now, the lady from the central bank, you could probably be quite interested in this because we talked about the capital adequacy ratio. There it is, look, minimum total capital, 8% in 2013. And then still, as of January 2019, 8%. But there's enhancements to the capital, which you can see on the next line, which is the minimum capital plus a buffer, conservation buffer, goes from 8 to 10.5. And from what you told me, you know, you're above that. So it's a very prudential, cautious approach, which I'm sure Miguel will be very pleased about. The central bank are directing, did you say 14%? Natasha, was it 14?
The target is 17%, the trigger is 14%.
Right, thank you very much. There you are, there's a very, so you're, you know, you're above the expectation there. Now, the other interesting thing about this chart, so don't worry too much about all these buffers and buffers and buffers and buffers. It's just, you know, sections of additional capital to strengthen the balance sheet. So if you think of the balance sheet of any financial institution, what they're doing, the committee is saying it needs to be strengthened. Why? Because of the global crisis in 2008, where a number of institutions, as you know, failed, including Lehman Brothers in the US. They were one of the first ones, which brings me quite nicely to the ratio at the top, look. Can you see that leverage ratio there? coming in. Now, the leverage ratio is a new type of ratio in banking, but we've used this in business for a long, long time. In a business context, if you're looking at a business balance sheet, you'd be looking for two ratios. One is the debt to equity, which the bankers call the gearing ratio. And the other wider measurement is when you look at all the liabilities in the business relative to the capital base. So in business, the leverage ratio is all liabilities to the capital base. But in banking, it's different, as we'll see. The leverage ratio is actually all of the assets in the balance sheet relative to the capital base. Now, a little bit earlier, someone asked the question about the credit unions. Now, interestingly enough, we started the risk manager program with Jamaica on Thursday, and there were two people from credit unions, and one of the ladies, she was the supervisor for 25 credit unions in Jamaica. I wouldn't fancy that job, 25 credit unions, and she's the risk officer in charge of these 25. And she said what they've brought in is a type of leverage ratio for the credit unions where they're saying the capital base needs to be 10% of the total assets. So I thought I'd just give you that extra information. So strengthening the balance sheet, bringing in a leverage ratio, and then the other two ratios that the committee have brought in. Once again, these are business ratios that we've used for years and years and years. These two right at the bottom of the page, you could bracket those together and put cash flow. These are cash flow ratios, yeah? And in business, as you know, cash flow is essential, you know, for payment of all costs and everything, and also to retire any debt by way of loans or overdrafts. You need cash flow. So these are new. And again, these were introduced by the Basel Committee in response to some of the crises following 2008. There's two ratios. We'll go into the definitions a little bit later, but one's liquidity coverage, which you could just write on there or make a note of. That's short term. It's a short-term cash flow ratio. And the net stable funding ratio is an annualized ratio. So we'll come back on those two. But that chart, so if people ask you about Basel III, you know, you can show the previous slide that it's enhancements. As you can see, enhancements to Basel II. And then you can show them this annex, which sets out the key parameters: strengthening the balance sheet, leverage ratio, and two cash flow ratios. So all of this is to try and help protect against the shocks that we've seen. So I'll just flip through these quite quickly and start to take us to some of the breaking news section. Now, this was a real shock to us in the UK because in London, the UBS, the big gigantic Swiss bank, in the London office close to Liverpool Street Station, which Miguel will know, there's a huge pink building there, and it contains staff, over 600 staff working for UBS in their London division, which are primarily traders in the capital markets. Now, we thought by reputation about Swiss and the Swiss banks, you know, they're very strictly controlled, et cetera, et cetera. So this was a big shock. City rogue trader, there's a good English name for you, Miguel, Kwaku Aduboli, obviously from African origin, arrested over 2 billion, right? This is not 2 million, right? This is 2 billion UBS loss, which would totally extinguish, I'm sure the lady Latasha from the central bank would agree, would extinguish practically all the banks, I think, put together. 2 billion loss. City trader arrested by London police. And the bank said in the statement, UBS has discovered a loss due to unauthorized trading in its investment bank, matter still being investigated. Now, those of you like Miguel who love social media, which I actually hate because I get all these things from ladies in China and ladies in Africa and whatever, because I've traveled so much. So I try to stay clear of the social media. I wish Donald Trump would, but that's another issue. So Miguel, if you're recording, you'll have to delete that part, or he could send some people to look for me. No, he won't. Okay. So what happened was, over the weekend, this man, the trader, his manager was looking at social media, and he saw this posting from his trader, Kweku Adobali. And what it said on social media was, and you're a lot of religious people in Nassau, what he said on this social media was, only God can save me now. Boy, oh boy. Now then, Cassandra, what do you think of that as a risk statement? You have to switch your mic on if you want to speak.
I'm saying that's serious.
That is serious, yeah. So what the hell's going on? So on the Monday morning, when they went back to work, they closed this position down. That's when they discovered this 2 billion loss. Now, there's a lot of serious risk management questions here.
Yes.
How could this man trade up to a loss of $2 billion? So what sort of controls must there have been in place?
Seemed like every control was out of place.
Yeah, everything's out of place.
Seemed like they didn't have any in place.
Yeah, so let me tell you what happened. Kweku, before his job in frontline training, guess where he worked? He worked in the back office. In which department do you think?
Operations?
Yeah, in the operational side of the back office. So he actually knew all of the security codes and the ins and outs of the procedures. So when HR said, oh, you've done a really good job in the back office, we're going to promote you to the front office, he thought, hallelujah, my day has come, because if they'd investigated his background properly, as HR should properly do, when you're going to put somebody front line, because they've got access to a lot more speculative information. And if they'd checked him out properly, they would have seen he was a notorious gambler. He was gambling, in gambling organizations, etc., all the time. So, of course, when they put him in the front office, he thought, well, this is great news, because now I can gamble with the bank's balance sheet. And boy, oh boy, did he do that.
Did he not?
Did he win or did he lose? Well, in the end, you always lose. Except, of course, if you're in the casino in the Atlantis, you probably win. maybe. Yeah. Well, you can't gamble anyway, can you, Higgins?
I have a question.
Yeah. Okay. Question. Good question.
Sorry. So these comments he made that on his personal social media platform.
Yeah, which were picked up. Now I don't know how wide his social media platform went. Whether it included some of his colleagues at work, but that's what he said on his social media.
And this was, I guess, regarding things that was happening around the bank around that time. And I guess that's his personal knowledge of working in operations.
No, everything appeared to be fine till he made this statement, only God can save me now. So his manager, like Cassandra said, there's something going on here. Mm-hmm. So what they did was they closed these positions on the Monday morning and found he'd actually made a loss of 2 billion. So what control should have been in place? The primary control to start with. So
there should have been There should have been some type of check back. Like I know with us in the bank, we have a 2I and a 4I principle. So if you put in something, someone else has to check it and approve it.
Right.
Yes. So there's obviously no checking going on here.
Yeah, they had no controls.
I mean, how the hell could he get up to $2 billion? I mean, 2 million would have been bad enough, but $2 billion. There's no controls, quite right, Cassandra. And this man knew it. He knew the system, so he manipulated the system. What else? What else is missing? What type of control would...
Defense, what about internal audit and your compliance?
Yeah, maybe they could have spotted it. I'm not too sure about that. But I think the starting point would be the control of his manager over what he was doing. So in his defense, after being arrested, he said, well, my manager knew about it. And he said, my manager was very happy when I was making profits, but he only became unhappy when I made a loss.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, exactly. So there you go. And this, of course, is what happens in these risk management events, particularly when the big ones. So what should have been in place? The lady from Ansbacher, you got close to it. What type of control should have been in place to stop?
Should there have been a limit control?
Very good. Who said that?
Sorry, what was the answer?
You were speaking there. We didn't hear you very clearly.
Leslie.
What did you say?
I had said that shouldn't there have been a limit control in place?
Exactly. Now, what they call this in trading is a stop loss limit, right? Stop loss, LOSS, limit. Yeah, there should have been a stop loss system in place that's computer based, that if you hit...
If you hit a certain point, it kicks you out of the trade.
That's it, it closes you down. Very good.
Yes.
So where was that?
But that is if the platform that he was trading on had that mechanism in place.
Yes.
It's not always in there. That's a mitigating mechanism that should have been in place if they had any controls in. That should have been in place.
So if I told you it was in place, how do you think this happened?
He must have.
He knew it from where he worked before. Yeah.
He must be hooked up with the IT person.
No, he didn't need to, because he knew these codes and he knew how to override it. So he simply overrode it on the system.
See, and that's if and like the other.
It's an issue too.
Yeah.
So
you need to have your controls in place. One person. So like it all boils down to them not having basically any controls in place, not even the bare minimum.
Yes, so people talk a lot nowadays, about machines and the intelligence of the machines, etc. But the machines can always be overwritten if you're smart enough to know how the system works.
Yeah.
So this is what happened, and he's facing a jail sentence.
Yes, but there's also should have been some separation of duties, because
exactly.
Even though the machines could have been overwritten, there should have been some type of policy to say, well, you cannot override your own input.
Right, I agree.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're back to what we said earlier, that a lot of these cases, although they appear quite complex, at the end of the day, generally, they are a breach of basic operational controls. And you find that we have lots of case studies during our program, and you find that most of them, when we dig deeply into it, it's something basic that's gone wrong, like separation of duties or controls and checks, things like that. Yeah. Now, what happened here, this is a bit closer to home. This is Antigua. You'd read about this, Stanford and his investment bank.
Oh, I remember him.
Oh, gosh, yeah. No,
He owns just about just about everything in Antigua.
He did. Well,
yes. It was mind-boggling.
So he told people he did.
Well, so he did. Well, actually, the natives there as well, when they took you on a tour, every single place that they passed, they told you it was owned by him.
Yeah, the cricket ground right next to the airport.
He was basically the main employer on the island.
On the island, yes. So what did he do? Well, he worked a Ponzi scheme with the investors in that what he did was he did, it's the usual thing, you'll see it, and again, referring to the program this week in Jamaica, they've just had one on the internet there, where one lady on the course, she was involved, but she got her money out quick. If you get your money out quick, you're going to make something, but if you don't, and you're towards the tail end, when it collapses, you're going to lose a lot. So in Antigua, more than 20,000 investors lost money through the scheme. Why? Because Mr. Stanford promised if you invested in the Stanford Investment Bank, he would pay you more than the marketplace could pay.
Right.
Now, if you think of Madoff in New York, it was the same thing. Madoff in New York, but his was different because he targeted very rich people. So he invited very rich people to join his investment scheme, but you could only join if you could show a personal net worth of $500,000 before he would allow you to invest in his scheme, where he promised to pay you more than the market rates. But it was another Ponzi scheme. And what killed Madoff was the global recession, because these schemes only work as long as there's new investors coming in, where you can take some of the new money. So is Miguel still on the screen, or is he closed down? He's probably closed down. No, he's there, Steve, he's there. So if Miguel, which he does, of course, I've known Miguel, what, more than 10 years now?
About that?
2000, it's longer than that, 2005?
Yeah, around 2005, 2004, 2005.
Goodness me, that's 15 years, everybody. Yeah, goodness me. So Miguel, because he's known me all that time, and he's heard about my investment vehicle, and I tell him, Miguel, look, I'm a really smart investment manager. I can pay you more than the market rate. I can pay you, like 4% more or whatever. So he invests in my fund. And then what's going to happen is the word gets around, and then maybe Cassandra, she's heard about Miguel investing in my fund. So she decides, well, I'd like to get in that fund because I've heard he pays more. So she joins, which is just in time for me, because the time's coming when I've got to pay Miguel more than I've actually been able to earn in the marketplace, because I promised him more, and I promised him the return was more, and I promised him it was low risk. Now, you know, there's that parameter, isn't there? Risk versus return. If something's low risk, you generally get a low return. High risk, you can get high return. But all of these schemes is where they say it's low risk and a high return. So how does it continue? So I can just manage to pay Miguel because Cassandra's invested. So I take some of her money to pay the extra money that I promised Miguel. Now, what happens when Cassandra's due for extra money at the same time as Miguel is? Well, now I've got a bigger problem, but oh no, I haven't. This lovely lady from the central bank, Latasha, she's heard about the other two people, so she joins my scheme. That's how it works, yeah? Mm-hmm. So out of the extra money I've got to pay Miguel and Cassandra again, I've got new money coming in. So these things will work as long as there's new money coming in. But when the new money stops, that's the end of it. Now look at Stanford. He used to invest his cash for more than 20 years. His Antigua bank collapsed in Antigua. What I would say to you is, if you're going to run some type of fraud, do it in the UK. Don't do it in the USA or under any USA jurisdiction. Because look at what happened. He had a 110-year jail sentence. In the UK, you probably get a 6 or 7 year sentence. And if you behaved yourself nicely, you'd probably get out in about 3 or 4 years. But look at that in the US, 7 billion investment. Now look at this. Once again, we all read these magazines. Forbes magazine estimated him as the 605th richest man in the world, and estimated his personal net worth at $2 billion. But the truth of the matter was, he never had any money. The only money he ever had was the investors' money in. And it was really embarrassing for us. Now, I know you guys don't do much cricket in Bahamas, except when I come, Miguel and I go to the cricket club, because I can look at some of the old pictures of the cricketing, English cricketers. But in the Caribbean for a long time, there's only two teams who really want to beat each other, and that's England and the West Indies, yeah? That's been the main thing. I mean, more recently, it's people like Australia and Pakistan and all these other people. But since time began with cricket, it was England versus West Indies. So Stanford flies in to the UK. Then what does he do? He rents a helicopter, and he comes by helicopter to the Oval Cricket Ground on the perimeter of London, and he lands his helicopter and 4 big men jump out of the helicopter, and we all know Pirates of the Caribbean, Johnny Depp and all that. And these men get out of the helicopter, they've got a big treasure chest, and he flips it open and he's throwing all this cash up in the air. And he said, there's $1 million in here. You can be as rich as I am. People in the UK come and invest in Antigua in the Stanford Investment Bank. Oh boy, oh boy. Fortunately, not too many people invested. I know quite a lot about this because I've actually worked in the reconstructed bank, which is now East Caribbean Amalgamated Bank, which is close to the airport. Gosh, when you go in there, do you get a shock? You walk in there, there's marble everywhere. And then the customer waiting areas, there's all these huge leather armchairs and wonderful sofas. And then when you look up at the wall, not like the wall you can see behind me here with this kind of plastic map, when you look at the wall in front of you, the whole wall is a huge global picture of the world. Now, where do you think Antigua is on this global map of the world? Do you think it's like where it is on mine, heading down that way? That's the other way, isn't it? That way, yeah. Antigua is the center of the world, and the Stanford Investment Bank, the center of the world. Gosh, so that's a shocking story. Next one is Gupta, former Goldman Sachs director. We're not going to spend much time on this because we're going to have an insider trading case later. But those of you working in risk management, I would suggest to you, insider trading is the most difficult thing to ever prove that it was insider trading. For example, Les Miguel and I were at the cricket ground. We're having a few beers. He's having more than me. Only a joke. So I'm drinking. So I say to Miguel, "Oh, by the way, have you heard about so-and-so, so-and-so? I think the shares are going to really jump in value tomorrow." So next day, Miguel invests in those shares and they do jump in value. So the question is that insider trading by Miguel or not? Any views on that, ladies?
Can you repeat that?
Okay, so I gave Miguel a hint that this company shares are going to increase in value the next day. So he buys the shares and they do go up in value. Is that insider trading?
Depends on what I would say, based on the preliminary information that you just gave, it depends on your relationship to that company. I mean,
very, very good. That's very smart. Well said.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if the conversation
is Miguel an employee of the company as well?
Yeah. No, he's not. He's outside.
He's outside. But what is the relationship to Mr. Checkley to that company?
That's it. Well,
how is he go? Or how is Mr. Checkley going to benefit from it?
Exactly.
No,
See how smart these ladies are, Miguel? See, they're right in on it. Yeah. Now, so we're back at the cricket club, and I actually work. I'm an executive in this particular company, right? So I say, "Oh, Miguel, the shares are going to go up tomorrow because, so-and-so, so-and-so. Now, can you do me a favor, Miguel? Here's $10,000. Can you buy some shares for me, but not in my name, because I'm working at the company, but can you buy the shares?" So is that insider trading?
That is insider trading.
Of course.
It is. It's for your benefit.
That's it. So that's much clearer cut, but it's a difficult one. So if you in risk management get faced with insider trading, you've got to really, really, dig away at all the background facts and try and be as close as you can to what the situation actually is. So it's a difficult one. We'll come back. We have an insider trading case study a bit later on. Now this one is well, it's sad in some ways, but it's disgusting in some other ways. So to cut long story short, Bob Diamond, an American banker, came into the UK and he took over Barclays Capital, which was the London-based investment bank at Barclays. So Barclays is a huge group, the investment bank, very, very big, and they wanted a new chief executive. So Bob Diamond came in from the US and he did an absolutely brilliant job at Barclays Capital. The profits were enormous, the bonuses were all coming out to the directors, etc., etc. And then the Barclays group, that's the overall group, chief executive was due to retire. So they looked for somebody who had done really well, which was Bob Diamond. So he was made chief executive of Barclays. And then look at what happens here. Bob Diamond and senior aide forced to quit. Bob Diamond, chief executive of Barclays, and one of his most senior lieutenants were forced to resign after the bank came under pressure to remove senior executives over LIBOR rigging. Come on, now anybody know what that is? What's LIBOR?
Can you repeat that?
What is LIBOR? Do you know LIBOR?
LIBOR?
The LIBOR rate is the rate, I think that, I don't know who sets this rate, but I think there's some international body that sets this rate.
That's close, yeah. That's close to it, yeah.
Yeah, they set the rate for lending. So it will be plus prime. It would be the rate plus whatever the bank's institution rate is.
Correct. So with it being London interbank offered rate, which is LIBOR.
Exactly.
Yeah, so this is set by a committee within London, of which Barclays will be one of the members on the committee. Now, what was proven was this rate was manipulated. Now, if it's manipulated, what that means is the organizations who are basing thousands, if not millions, of transactions in the city of London using LIBOR as a benchmark, what will happen to an organization like Barclays Capital, you know, who are an investment bank and using this as a trading benchmark? Do you think they'll make more profit or less?
If it's manipulated?
Depends which way it's manipulated, yeah. So if it's manipulated to their benefit, they can make a lot more profit. That's it. And if you make more money, what does that mean you can do? Pay bigger bonuses to people like the senior executives and, of course, the chief executive. So Barclays ended up being fined $290 million to settle with US and British regulators. Now, what happens to Bob Diamond? Okay, he gets told to resign, but don't feel too sorry for him because look what he gets. 17 million, which at the time was about 25 million US dollars to leave. Goodness me. And then look what happens to the lady who's head of the remuneration committee, because the shareholders, as you might imagine, were absolutely outraged that he should be paid this amount of money, you know, after he's manipulating, one of the parties to manipulating LIBOR. So Alison had to go to leave time, to devote time to other interests, was the expression she used. And it wasn't just London. Look at this. RBS were fined over LIBOR rigging. Frankfurt in Germany, Deutsche Bank suspends 5 traders. And as far away as Tokyo, cartel involvement in Japanese rate fixing. That's disgusting, isn't it? Okay, look, I need to get you to do something because I've been talking like nonstop and we've only got about 12 minutes to run. Now, can you see this on the screen or on your own screen sufficiently well?
Are you able to open it up?
I'll try and make it a bit bigger, yeah?
Yes.
Yes, it's better.
Put it in PowerPoint view.
Well, I can put it in screen show, but well, we'll take a chance to see what happens, yeah. Oh, there you are. Good suggestion. Thank you very much. Miguel, why didn't you suggest that? See, these ladies are much sharper than you and I. Okay, so here's the case study. Look, what we're doing here is risk managers, we're going to look at this one-page balance sheet summary from the perspective of seeing if you can identify any risks. Now, please compare 2001 with 2008. And please forget for the moment the column that's headed up CAGR, because as you'll see as we progress through this, that's quite misleading. So if you're going to do any increases, you need to look at the actual figures. So have a look. I'll give you 5 minutes and then we'll start to talk about it before we finish. So what things catch your eye? Can you see any warning signals in this balance sheet?
Consumer loans increased by 100%.
Very good. That's a good start. Look at the loans. Customer loans from 201 billion or million or whatever, more than doubled, look, to 435. So that's a huge increase. So this is a banking balance sheet. So how do banks support the lending on the balance sheet? What do they do? What's the primary business model? What do they do, banks, to support the loans? Well, the answer's on the next line, so I don't need to say much more than that. You're taking deposits, don't they? Correct? Come on, ladies.
They do.
Yeah. So how much deposits have they taken in? Well, they've increased, but how much?
Yeah, it increased.
Yeah, but how much?
It increased, but it didn't increase
As
much as significant as the increase in loans. So that is a risk point right there.
Was that Charlene talking?
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you. Very smart. Yeah. So there's a risk there because the banking basic business model is we take in deposits, and a lot of those will be short term, and then we make loans, some of which will be quite long term. So it's a balancing act. But what's happened here? Look, you can see they've had aggressive growth in their lending by more than 100%. And what's happened on the deposits is, somebody could work it out, it's probably 50, 60% growth. So there's a serious imbalance there. So what type of risk are we talking about there with that imbalance?
We're talking about a liquidity risk.
Exactly. Very good. Very good. A liquidity risk. Why? Because we're not getting enough cash flow in from the depositors to support the cash flow going out to these loans people. Now then, but at the same time, the chief executive would say to you, well, okay, but look at my total assets in the balance sheet. They've grown from 274 billion to 631 billion. So aren't you impressed by that?
No, because there, as we stated, there's the underlying risk of the liquidity issue, and this can cause a problem in the long run, or even in the short run.
Exactly. So an interesting ratio to work would be if we have customer loans of 201 billion relative to total assets of 274. And I've done this with Miguel before on different commercial banks in the Caribbean, and quite often the lending to total assets will come out at maybe 60, 65%, sometimes as high as 70%. So if we looked at loans to the total assets, in the save time I worked this out, it's 73%. And then if we look at this alleged good increase in the total assets, then we did the same little ratio. So again, it's common sense approach. If we take 435 and divide it by 630, what you'll get is a very significant figure of close on 70%. So the reason why there's this apparent really good improvement in total assets is actually backtracks once again to the growth in the lending portfolio. Okay, now, another defense they're going to come up with is, yes, but just a minute, take a look at our shareholders' equity position. Look at that, it's gone from 9.8 to 17.8. So that illustrates huge profits being earned. Why? Well, come on.
Well, the profits, the profits are being earned on the loans.
On the increase in loans. Very good, Shirley.
Exactly. But then again, it reverts back to the point that there's still an underlying risk, because what if these loans become underperforming, and also we have that ratio where there is insufficient deposits. So
That's it,
underlying risk.
Yeah, so we can't get away from this underlying liquidity worry. And if we looked at the loans to deposits ratio, which the central bankers probably will do, then you see loans to deposits as a ratio, a high 143% in an adverse position. So that's high. But then look at what happens after this loan growth. It goes up to 196%. So an extremely high position that we're moving to. So there's another warning signal there. Now the next warning signal is a little bit more difficult probably for you to pick up. But can you see wholesale funding? So what's wholesale funding? What do they mean by that? Anybody? Wholesale funding.
The corporate portfolio, commercial?
The wholesale funding, no, this is the capital markets, the money markets in the UK. So what you can see here, look, is wholesale funding of less than 1 year duration. What they did was, because they're short of cash flow, which we suspected, they borrowed money in the money markets, look, of 89 billion. And then the next point, look, they borrowed close to 120 billion. So they're actually propping up their cash flow by, not by getting money, from the depositors, but by borrowing money externally in the money markets. So that's quite a dangerous thing to do repeatedly, because you're putting a risk on your business that you can get money overnight. Now, of course, the dates are quite key, because in 2008, of course, we had the global crisis. Remember what happened to the wholesale money markets globally? Well, they froze. They froze, the money markets froze. So what that means is this organization couldn't go into the money markets to prop up the liquidity that Shalene's quite worried about. So what they need to do now is they've got to get cash flow from somewhere. Now, coupled with this is another warning signal, and this is that leverage ratio I was talking about that the Basel Committee have now brought in, but it wasn't in at the time. Can you see its assets divided by the equity base? And you can see the leverage is 28 times leverage, which is huge. And then it goes up to 35. Now, Lehman Brothers, when they collapsed in the US, despite reporting huge profits, their leverage was over 30 times leverage. And you know what happened to Lehman Brothers? They ran out of cash. The US Fed decided not to bail them out, and they went broke. Now, this organization are going to have to go cap in hand to our central bank, the Bank of England. The central bank would look at it, then they'll discuss the options with the British government. And on this particular case, this organization got a bailout. And this is the final slide we're going to be looking at. And this is it, look. You've been looking at HBOS. Now, some of you won't have heard of HBOS, but HBOS was the merger of the Halifax Building Society. So that's like a savings institution where they take deposits and they lend money out for people to buy their own personal home. So taking the deposits, lending out 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And then BOS stands for Bank of Scotland, which was a commercial bank. So you've got these two coming together, which at first glance might seem to be a great thing. And people will talk about the synergies, of a savings society coming together with a commercial bank and all this blah, blah, blah. But in actual fact, this merger was a terrible merger, because the people in the savings bank, they had no idea about commercial banking, and the people in the commercial bank had no idea about the savings bank. So the whole strategies for risk was a mess. And look at this, the guy who was the chief executive, because they did so well in the beginning of this merger, the Queen actually knighted him and he became Sir James Crosby. And then, of course, you've seen the balance sheet, and the business collapsed and they had a bailout. So can you see the last bullet point there for this morning? HBOS collapsed, forcing a 20.5 billion taxpayer bailout. At the time, that was about 30 billion US. Now, this has really hit some very raw nerves now, because, okay, we're not in 2008 anymore. We're now in 2020, And the opposite situation is that at that time, the government took the taxpayers' money and injected it into banks that were on the point of failing, like this one. But now when the situation is reversed, you know, consumers and customers and businesses in the UK are under a dire predicament because, as you've seen in Nassau, businesses are closed. Okay, now you should be quite proud of yourselves because what you've looked at is this huge organization. Why on earth couldn't the Treasury people, couldn't the board of directors, couldn't the risk director, couldn't the chief executive, couldn't the chairman, could nobody read that simple balance sheet? So what do you think the problem was? Could they read it? Well, yeah. Well,
Probably some people cannot effectively read a balance sheet.
Exactly. Very well
and
said.
Sometimes, even though you may have a high position in an organization,
yes,
you have gone through school and you learn how to read a balance sheet, you have forgotten what some terminologies are and some things. So sometimes you have to constantly be looking at a balance sheet for different organizations, for different things, and constantly reminding yourself of these things. And it's very simple. Sometimes people just don't know how to read a balance sheet.
Excellent. Well said. Well said. So on a final note then, because we're due to close, there was this Spanish bank collapse just a few years ago, and it was a huge bank in Spain. So the Spanish government made an investigation into why the business collapsed, and they were interviewing the board of directors individually. And there was this lady on the board of directors. They asked her the question. They said, look, you know, you're getting paid €250,000 a year for this very senior position in the bank and on the board of directors. Couldn't you see there was something wrong when you looked at the bank's balance sheet? And you won't believe what she said. She said, look, I'm a pharmacist by profession. How could you expect me to understand the bank's balance sheet? End of story.
But that goes to fit and proper. Having the
fit and proper. Yeah.
Yes.
Very good. And yes, people have got to be fit and proper for the job. And currently in the UK now, which is only recent, you know, even if you just want to be a non-executive director of a bank, you're going to have to be interviewed by the Financial Conduct Authority to make sure you're fit and proper to hold the post of a non-executive director of a financial institution. So hopefully things will get better. Okay, well, that's it for today. Thank you for giving up your morning. And we got through quite a lot of stuff. I hope you found it interesting so far.
Yes.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. So we're going to meet again next Saturday, and we'll continue the story from there.
Okay. We're going to meet again for the next 6 Saturdays.
Okay.
Oh,
okay. Yeah, for the next 6 Saturdays.
Yeah. Thanks, Miguel. Yeah.
Bye, ladies.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you too.
And stay safe.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye then.